Hey guys, so this is everything you're going to need to make these masala chips at home, and it's not a lot, it's very simple. The whole recipe is really simple. So let's start with the most important thing, which is of course the potato. And I'm using King Edward potatoes here, and this is a floury variety that we find here in the UK. If you're UK based, you can also use Maris Pipers, and if you are in a different country, then please do look up online what the best type of floury potato local to you is. So all I did to this potato was peel it. I just used a vegetable peeler for that, and then I cut it into kind of like chip-sized batons, and as you can see I've got them soaking in a bowl of cold water here, and what that does is just stops that potato from turning brown or oxidizing, and it also rinses away any excess starch that might be on those potatoes. And as you can see, I have cut them to a medium-ish size, and they're a little bit rough and ready, they're a bit jagged, and they're not perfect. They don't look like the kind that you buy in the shops, but they are homemade and they're gonna taste phenomenal, trust me. So there's no set amount of time that you need to soak these potatoes for. Just keep them in the cold water until you're ready to cook them, and you can leave them probably for about half a day or so. Just keep it in the fridge, make sure it's nice and cold so that those potatoes don't start kind of looking sad and limp. And what we're going to do is drain these off and dry them in a tea towel before we fry them. So like I said, the rest of this recipe is pretty straightforward, so you're only going to need a handful of ingredients for the sauce. The first being a little bit of oil, and then we are going to move on to our little plate of spices here, and of course I've got some tomatoes here as well. But let's talk through these spices first and foremost, and they're not all spices. So I have some salt here, some asafoetida or hing, which adds a really lovely flavour to this, some chili powder. I'm using Kashmiri red chili powder, and that gives a really lovely flavour, a mild flavour, as well as a nice colour to this. I've got some black salt here, or kala namak, and that gives this a really lovely flavour as well. So you can add that. If you don't have that, then you can also add a little bit of chaat masala if you like the flavour of chaat masala. I've got some dhana jiru here, which is a blend of cumin seed powder and coriander seed powder, which is mixed. If you don't have it ready mixed, then you can just use equal proportions of each ingredient to the same measure as stated in my recipe. And finally, in my plate of spices here, I've just got some dehydrated garlic, that is dried garlic powder, and of course you can use fresh if you like. I like to use the garlic powder in this though, because it adds that kind of hit of garlic that you really crave when you're having like something really potatoey like bhajia or chips, and that is also something that I use in my crispy bachadana bhajia recipe, and it is really delicious and offers that big kick of garlic that you really want. And finally, I have a little bit of demerara sugar here. You can use any kind of sugar you have in the kitchen. This is just something that I had in my cupboard. You can use white sugar if you prefer that too. Now in my big bowl here I have some passata, which is just tomatoes which have been blended and then sieved so that all of those seeds and skins are out of there. You can buy this in jars. It's commonly used for making kind of like pasta sauces. You can find it in pretty much any big supermarket. If you can't find it, then of course you can use a tin of chopped tomatoes. Just make sure you blend it down. You can even use fresh tomatoes as well, but make sure again you're using a high-powered blender to blend them down and then sieve it through to get rid of any of those extra skins, because we want this sauce to be nice and smooth so that they coat those chips evenly. In my little pot here I have some lemon juice, and finally a plate of garnishes here. I have some lime wedges, some finely chopped spring onion, and lots of fresh coriander, and that is pretty much it. Actually, the last thing that you're going to need for this is of course oil to fry your chips. I haven't shown it here because I'm going to need an awful lot of it and I don't have a bowl big enough, but I'm going to use rapeseed oil today. You can use vegetable oil, sunflower oil, any kind of oil that has a high smoke point. Here I have a non-stick pan heating up, and to that I'm just going to add a little bit of oil, not too much, just a little bit, and that's going to make our sauce lovely and glossy. And once that is heated up, I'm just going to add in my red chili powder, my asafoetida, the dried garlic, the black salt, and the cumin and coriander powder, or the tanajiru, and that is all going to get mixed up just for a couple of seconds, and then I'm going to go ahead and add my tomatoes. So everything is now in my pan, and I'm just going to give it a quick little mix, and you don't really want to cook this for too long, just very briefly to kind of release those colours and aromas. You don't want anything to burn, so just be brief, keep it over a lowish heat so that doesn't burn. And once all of that is mixed up, I'm going to add in my tomatoes. Our tomatoes have just been cooking for a minute now, and this sauce is bubbling away. So the next thing to do is to add our lemon juice and the salt and the sugar from earlier. And as I said, you can add any kind of sugar you like. I'm using brown sugar because that's what I have in the cupboard today, but just give it all a really good mix, and that's what's going to give these chili chips, masala chips, the hot, sweet and sour kind of flavour. Our tomato sauce is bubbling away now. All I need to do is cover it up with a lid so that all of that water in there doesn't evaporate. We want that to stay nice and saucy. Just let it cook though. So keep it over a medium-low heat for about 10 minutes, and that is just going to take the rawness of those tomatoes away so that the flavours have a chance to kind of develop. It's been about 10 minutes now, and I've taken the lid off the pan, and I just wanted to show you here that this sauce is ready when you can see kind of like oil pooling around the edges. When the oil comes to the surface like this, that is when you know that your sauce is kind of ready to be taken off. So at this stage, just turn the heat off and then cover it up again so we have some of that water left in there. And then this is ready to be cooled down, and we can get along with making our chips. I've laid a tea towel out on my work surface here. It's a clean tea towel and it's dry, and what I'm going to do now is pull some of my potatoes out and just lay them on top of this tea towel. And what we need to do, and this is really important guys, is to dry these potatoes off thoroughly. You don't want any specks of water left on these potatoes whatsoever, so we need to do a really good job of making sure that every surface of these potatoes are free from water. And the reason for that is because when this potato hits the hot oil, water is going to make that oil kind of sizzle up, and as we all know, oil and water don't really mix very well, so just make sure that they are really nice and dry just so you can work safely. So the first thing that I need you to do is go and find the longest chip in the pile of potatoes that you possibly have. And the reason for that is that I don't want you to burn your fingers while you're testing this oil. So what we're going to do is very carefully pop this potato in the oil, and if you can see some little bubbles, just like that, can you see those tiny little bubbles? That tells us that these potatoes are at the right temperature for blanching, and if you remember, it has to be a really low kind of temperature so that the potatoes cook through nicely from the inside, and then they can be fried on a bit of a higher temperature afterwards. So let's just drop that one in, and then I'm going to show you an easy way of getting all of your potatoes into the pan without splashing hot oil everywhere. So our little chip guy that we popped in is still in there, and now I have put all of my potatoes, dry potatoes that is, I dried them in my tea towel. They're all lovely and dry now. I've popped them on a perforated spoon which I use for frying, and I'm very carefully going to just drop that into the oil, working in really small batches because we want these potatoes to kind of cook through from the inside and fry and not boil in a temperature of oil that is far too low. So it has to be just right, and as you can see there's lots of tiny little bubbles in there, and that tells me that these potatoes are going to blanch really nicely. So that's going to take about 3 to 4 minutes, and then we're going to slowly lift them out. They'll be really pale and they won't look anything at all like chips, but you're on the right track. Starting to take my blanched chips out of here now, if I can call them chips here. They're probably more still potato than they are chip. And as you can see, they are still super white and looking quite anemic, and that is great because that tells us that these have not been browned too much and they are nicely cooked all the way through, so they'll be lovely and fluffy on the inside. So what we need to do is just pop them in a little plate. Don't worry about draining them on paper towels or anything at this stage, because they are going to go back into the oil in a couple of minutes to cook on a much higher heat. My potatoes are all blanched now, and I just wanted to show you that these potatoes need to be at the stage where if you bend them, they kind of break in half like that, and that means that they are now ready to be fried in very, very hot oil. So what I've done is just increase the temperature of my oil drastically, and it is really hot. We need it to be over 200 degrees, 200 degrees centigrade, or about 220, and it needs to be bubbling like this. And to check that it is ready, we just need to again just drop our little chip in there, and if it sizzles like that, like big sizzle this time, then that is ready to drop in. So just make sure that those bubbles are going really fast before you pop these into the oil once more for their second frying. Now I've done my little perforated spoon trick again, just popped these on here so that they are easy to slide into the oil all in one go. This oil is roaring hot now, so I am just gonna pop them in, and you'll see they start really kind of sizzling quite immediately. And don't move them around too much, you don't want to break them, and these are just going to take a couple of minutes now. They'll turn really beautiful and golden and crispy on the outside, and that is what we all seek in the perfect chip. Our chips are looking gorgeous and golden in the oil here, and let me just show you the colour on some of these. So they are turning like lovely golden brown, and that is exactly what we want. So I'm going to kind of lift some of these out now and just pop them onto a lined baking tray, and that is just going to absorb some of that excess oil so that that doesn't go into our finished dish. And they're just going to cool very slightly on this. We're not going to put them into the sauce hot, we just want to combine them when they're both warm. There we go. And I'm going to continue frying off the rest of my chips, and then we'll mix them into that lovely sauce that we made earlier. These are now the perfect colour for me, and I'm just going to drain them over here on my paper towel, where I have some other ones draining as well. They're lovely and crispy, and that paper towel is just going to absorb some of that excess oil so that we don't have too much oil on our masala chips there. These are the right colour for me. This is how I like them. If you prefer them a bit darker or a bit lighter, then feel free to cook them a bit longer or for less time as well. That's totally your choice, and something that is also very subjective. Now I'm going to take my cooled sauce, and I've got my chips in a big bowl here, and I'm just going to add that into there. And you want to do this pretty much immediately before you serve your chips, and that way you know that they're gonna be lovely and crispy and hot. And can you hear how crispy those chips are? You want to do this gently, you don't want to break them, so just go easy, go slow, and just make sure that everything is nicely coated. Our chips are nicely mixed with the sauce, and I'm just going to go ahead and add some of our garnishes. So there's chopped spring onions and the coriander, and that is now ready to serve with our lime wedges and a lovely avocado mayo that I've also made.